You wake up and feel the weight again. That tightness in the chest, the dull ache behind your eyes. You scroll, you compare, you drag yourself out of bed like you're pulling your soul uphill. You tell yourself you're depressed. Maybe someone else told you first, a therapist, a friend, the internet. You wear the word like a coat, oversized, heavy, but oddly familiar. But what if Carl Jung would look at you and say, you are not really depressed? Not to dismiss your pain, not to gaslight your experience. Jung wasn't that kind of man. He stared deep into the abyss of the human psyche and didn't flinch, but he understood something we often forget. Not all sadness is pathology. Not every crack in the spirit is a clinical condition. Sometimes your soul is just trying to speak, and all you hear is static. What we call depression today, Jung might have called disconnection. Disconnection from your own self, from your instincts, from your meaning. When you're locked in that gray space where everything feels numb, what if that's not your mind breaking down, but your spirit breaking out? Jung saw symptoms not just as problems to fix, but messages to interpret. In his view, the psyche doesn't malfunction randomly. It rebels, it withdraws, it shuts off certain lights so you'll be forced to see in the dark. And that's the thing, we don't like the dark. We avoid it at all costs. We numb it with content, noise, screens, routines, diagnoses, and distractions. But Jung believed in the necessity of the dark. He believed in the night sea journey, the descent into the underworld that every soul must eventually take. Depression, he might say, isn't the enemy, it's the signal. You are not really depressed, he'd whisper. You are just being called inward, and you don't know how to listen yet. There's something brutal, but honest about that. It implies responsibility, not blame. It means this fog you're in might be your life trying to reset, reorganize, or awaken. Not in some cheesy self-help sense, in a raw, existential way. The way the caterpillar dies before it becomes a butterfly, the way a snake must shed its skin. But we're not taught to read our suffering that way. We're taught to fear it, medicate it, minimize it. And sometimes medication helps. Jung wouldn't deny that. But he'd also say, don't stop at the surface. Don't confuse the numbing of pain with the healing of the soul. Because healing requires facing the thing underneath the label of depression. It might be your unlived life, your suppressed anger, your unspoken grief, your forgotten creativity. The self you had to abandon to fit in, to survive, to be normal. Jung believed we carry our wholeness inside us, like seeds. But seeds must break before they grow. Depression, in his eyes, might be the soil cracking. So maybe you are not broken. Maybe your sadness is holy. Maybe what you call depression is your psyche refusing to go along with a life that's too small for your soul. Jung would never offer easy comfort, but he'd offer meaning. He'd sit beside you not to fix you, but to witness the transformation taking place in the silence. Because sometimes, the person you've been has to fall apart, so the person you truly are can finally begin. Carl Jung believed that the greatest tragedy of modern life wasn't illness or misfortune, it was the abandonment of the self. We spend our youth learning how to become acceptable, how to please, perform, adapt, belong. We learn what gets us love and what gets us punished. Slowly, piece by piece, we construct a version of ourselves that works. A mask. Jung called this mask the persona. The persona isn't fake, it's just partial. It's who we are when we're trying to function in society. But beneath it, something else waits. The true self. Wild, instinctual, flawed, feeling, complex. And when you spend too long denying that part of yourself, when you stuff it into the basement of your psyche, it doesn't disappear. It festers. That festering can feel like sadness, numbness, a loss of direction. You might call it burnout, or a crisis, or yes, depression. But Jung would see something deeper, a self that's suffocating, a soul that's tired of pretending, a life that no longer fits. This is what he meant when he said, "Depression is like a woman in black. If she turns up, don't shoo her away. Invite her in, offer her a seat, treat her like a guest, and listen to what she has to say." In Jungian language, depression isn't just a mood, it's a messenger. But we're not trained to listen. We're trained to escape, to keep moving, keep producing, keep performing. We distract ourselves with achievement or pleasure or self-optimization. We curate identities online. We post, comment, perform wellness. And all the while, the true self grows quieter until the silence becomes unbearable. Then comes the crash, the collapse, the shutdown, and you think you're depressed. But Jung would say, no, you're in the presence of the shadow. The shadow is the part of you you've rejected. The traits you were told were too much, not enough, not right. Your anger, your sensuality, your creativity, your chaos, your hunger. You pushed those parts down to survive, and rightly so. Children need to feel safe. But as adults, we're called to recover what we lost, to become whole, not just good. Depression might be the price of postponing that journey for too long. This is not easy work. Jung never said it would be. He knew that confronting the shadow is terrifying. You have to admit you're not who you thought you were. You have to let go of identities that kept you safe, but also small. You have to question your beliefs, your conditioning, even your morality. This is what Jung meant by individuation, the lifelong process of becoming your real self. But no one can walk that path for you. Therapists can guide, books can inspire, friends can support. But the real work happens inside, in silence, in honesty, in the dark. You might lose people when you begin to change. You might disappoint your family. You might no longer fit into the role you played for years. That grief is real. But so is the reward, aliveness, integrity, peace that doesn't come from performing, but from being. Jung never romanticized pain, but he respected it. He knew that sometimes the only way out is through, not around. He saw depression not as a flaw in the system, but as a sacred invitation. Not to die, but to stop pretending, to wake up, to come home to yourself. By now, we've followed Jung's vision through the fog of depression and into the deeper chambers of the self. We've unmasked the persona. We've faced the shadow. But Jung's work never stopped at analysis. His real obsession was integration, becoming whole. Because what if healing isn't about going back to how you were before the pain? What if it's about becoming someone you've never fully met yet, who's always been there? When Jung said, "You are not really depressed," he wasn't minimizing the darkness. He was asking you to question the story around it. Depression might not be a disease in every case. Sometimes it's the breakdown of a life that can't hold your truth anymore. It's your psyche revolting against meaninglessness. And meaning, for Jung, wasn't a luxury, it was fuel for the soul. Without meaning, we drift, we ache, we collapse. We become ghosts in our own lives. But meaning doesn't come from outside. It's not given to you by society, or a job, or a relationship. It comes from the alignment of your inner world. When your conscious life reflects the full truth of who you are, even the parts you've hidden. Jung called this alignment the self, not the ego, not the mask, but the deep center that holds all opposites. Your light and your dark, your wounds and your power, your logic and your madness. Integration means giving each part a voice, not to act on every impulse, but to know what lives in you. To stop being split against yourself. This is why depression, in his view, was often a failure to live fully, not a moral failing, but a psychological one. We become depressed when life becomes too narrow for the soul, when the script we're following is too shallow, too rigid, too false. The cure isn't always to feel better, it's to live deeper. That might mean pursuing the art you abandoned, ending the relationship that cages you, facing the childhood pain you buried, changing the way you relate to time, or God, or death. These aren't quick fixes, they are revolutions of being. Jung didn't believe the goal was happiness. He believed in wholeness. Because wholeness includes sadness, it includes confusion, it includes the void. But it also includes wonder, and power, and joy that isn't performative, but grounded. The kind of joy that rises after you've wrestled with your demons and realized they weren't monsters. They were memories, unloved parts, unfinished stories. So, are you really depressed? Maybe. Maybe clinically, chemically, biologically you are. And Jung would never ask you to ignore that. But he would ask you not to stop there. He would ask what your pain is trying to say. What is being mourned in your silence? What life is waiting on the other side of your collapse? Because depression might not mean the end of you. It might mean the end of who you are not, and the beginning of who you really are. You are not really depressed, Jung might say. You are becoming real.